Hello and welcome to Hippie High. This week we're going to be looking at YouTuber Joe M, who's kind of a right-wing nut. At this point, it seems like calling people a right-wing nut, somewhat redundant, of course, but nonetheless, I think this epitaph suits him quite nicely. He's made a video called From Dark to Light, which essentially is a sort of philosophical mission statement. And I think in many ways, it's a pretty good example of the kind of lens through which the right wing views the world. So without further ado, let's dive into it.
There was a time when our children stood at attention, and in one united voice recited the Pledge of Allegiance.
So what we've got here is a kind of list. A list of things that I guess are kind of symbols or markers that from Joe M's perspective he views as a kind of map of the greatness that they want to go back to, I suppose. It's kind of like an expression of the right-wing utopia. And I think in looking what kind of thing they consider to be utopian? Is that a word? I'm using it. The kind of thing that they think of as being utopian is a good way to understand what their goals are. Because they tend to come at things from the perspective of the ends justify the means, but just what are their ends? And that's why jumping into this can be quite educational. So their first thing that they picked out as something that they seem to be enjoying, promoting, is children regimentedly standing in rows reciting something they probably don't understand. Now, to me, this is extremely baffling as a British person, or basically as a non-American largely. We always find that American children do this really weird and quite fascisty. It kind of looks a bit fascisty if in fact it isn't on some level, but I kind of think that it is. Pledge allegiance to the flag. It's weird. And quite frankly, pledges really only have value when you have the option to not take the pledge, which you kind of don't. You're like basically forced into doing it before you know really what any of it means. And what does pledge allegiance to the flag mean? A flag's just a piece of paper. It's just an image. It's just or a piece of cloth, rather. It's basically meaningless. So why do they get people to do this? Well, they get them to do it to try and essentially quell independent thought. They're trying to teach children that this is the right way to think before they have had a chance to decide what it is, how they want to live their lives, or, you know, what value systems they may adopt. It's trying to enforceably push nationalistic values into children. I'd say this is nothing more than fascist indoctrination. Now, this is probably quite a controversial take if you're an American, but from a non-American's perspective, it's kind of a no-brainer. It's really obvious that that's what it is. So, step one of the right-wing utopia is the fascist indoctrination of children. Okay, so far, so awful.
When strength and honor meant something. When standing for our flag meant something.
Standing for a flag has never meant anything. It's nonsense. Literally doesn't mean anything. It's a sort of arbitrary, ritualistic, symbolic action to show servitude to a system which is oppressing you. It's nonsense. And this is really a kind of great example of what separates the left and right. That the right always peddles in these weird, sort of symbolic gestures. They want to protect statues and the flag and the nebulous concept of institutions, or the nebulous concept of the free market or profits over real-life human beings' lives. Whereas the left are focused on tangible things that you can see with your senses and actually have a materialist impact on people. Things like poverty, or black people getting shot by police. And you can see why when, if you're in charge of a sort of oppressive system, why getting your constituents, your citizens, to focus their attention on abstract symbols rather than material realities. Because any idiot can salute a flag or recite some bunk, and if they can trick you into cheering for those things while they're doing those things with one hand, and with the other hand they're poisoning your children, taking away your health care, or whatever else bloody scam they're up to this week, that's very convenient for them. Not for us, obviously. It's fucking awful for us.
There was a time when our history was taught with pride and respect.
Which is another way for saying whitewashing the past, you know. I mean, it must be extremely frustrating for right-wingers that reality has a left-wing bias. But you've basically got two choices. One, to teach people lies, or two, to teach people that you guys were kind of the bad guys in most of the situations. You know, that's just the reality for colonialist powers, centre of empires. You don't really get to that sort of position without being kind of a dirtbag to the rest of the world. The only way to get inordinate levels of wealth is to plunder it from elsewhere. It's just how things work. It's just fact. And America is a country that its very land was stolen from indigenous people and then built all of its infrastructure and wealth on the backs of slaves that have never been paid back. And if you're not teaching that to people in schools, you're actively teaching misinformation. You're actively making people dumber. So no, I don't think that that's good either. That sounds awful too.
When respect was given to those who served, bled, and died to protect and defend our freedoms.
That's just absolutely never happened. I mean, they give respect in some sort of linguistic sense, some sort of ritualistic nonsense, but materially, there's absolutely no respect given to the troops. To be honest, most of the time, the troops in countries where they don't have conscription are people who've been treated so badly by the system that they don't have any choice but to be thrown into a meat grinder for oil conglomerates' benefits and weapons manufacturers to make money off. Their lives are forfeit, and the ones that do survive and aren't, you know, blown apart, and they come back with PTSD and missing limbs and all sorts of horrible problems. A lot of them end up homeless because there's no safety net for them. And it's not like the right wing is talking about doing something about that. I'd say the biggest disrespect for the people who've ended up being troops is sending them to war in the first place. And real respect for the people who have to become soldiers, real respect would have to include a dose of reality. It would have to include the analysis that largely these wars aren't fought in the people's interest at all. I mean, that's a kind of ridiculous piece of propaganda that even the right hardly push anymore, because nobody thinks that these wars are sort of to protect our freedoms, really. Everyone knows they're not. So the biggest disrespect, I think, the biggest disrespect to the actual people is to have a military at all that does these things. The way you don't respect the troops is by pretending that the systems that oppress those people are good and valid. And yes, it might hurt some people who've been fooled to be told that they've been fooled, but you do them a greater disservice by pretending they haven't.
It was when we, the people, decided our future and had a voice that was heard.
I don't know when you think that was. I mean, Jesus, I don't think that's ever been the case, has it? Certainly not under capitalism, or feudalism before that. I mean, maybe in sort of revolutionary Cuba, at a push? Probably not. I don't think that's ever happened. People have some kind of say in things? No, this is completely imaginary. And I mean, that is, in a way, precisely what the left wants. That's why we support sort of unionisation and further democratisation of things. That's pretty much specifically what socialism is all about, really. But I'm pretty sure Joe M is not advocating for socialism here. He's advocating for a system far darker. And when he says the people, I don't think he means what I mean when I say the people. I think he means a very specific group of the people that he's chosen to elevate above all others, as we'll see in the next few examples he places on the screen.
All we ever wanted to do was the right thing, but they kept telling us we were wrong.
Did you notice that subtle propaganda there? Well, not quite very that subtle. All we wanted to do is the right thing. That sentence accompanied by a heterosexual couple there, both white, but they kept telling us we were wrong. And then an image of people getting up to polyamory. But also, you might have noticed that the images that he's chosen to represent those things directly contradicts what he was saying. All we wanted to do was the right thing. Is it? Or is it all you wanted to do was tell other people what you thought the right thing was to do and enforce that? Because polyamory takes place between consenting adults. It's not like anyone's coming into your relationship and saying, excuse me, you can't be monogamous. You've got to add a couple more people into this. No, that's just not happening. Nobody cares. If you want to live a trad lifestyle, I mean, I may find that personally distasteful and kind of a bit gross, but I'm not going to get in your face about it. If you want to live that disgusting, depraved perversion of a lifestyle, go ahead and do it. That's how the left feels about it. We don't care. We don't care what you want to do in your own house if it's consenting. We don't care. But here's the thing, the right do care. Because they don't just want to do the right thing. They want to enforce other people to do things that they think is the right thing, but the other people presumably don't, or else they would already be doing it. They want to take away people's freedoms to choose. That's essentially all this means. But if you say, say, I just want to take away everyone else's rights to choose how they live their lives on a personal level. I want to put laws in place that dictate their romantic connections to people. I want to tell people to stop jerking off to porn. I want to tell people that they can't be in a relationship with people they love. That kind of sounds bad, so it's much better to, in sort of, optic sense, to say, we just want to do the right thing. Just want to do the right thing. It's about as far from the right thing as you could possibly get. It's very much definitely the wrong thing to do. It's basically evil, really. So what can we learn about the right wing from this? Well, their utopia includes the fascist indoctrination of children. It's a place where independent thought is squashed and the mechanisms of oppression are treated with snivelling servitude, where symbolic nationalism takes precedence over material realities, where history is stripped away of truth and becomes nothing but self-aggrandizing delusion, where human beings are thrown into a meat grinder to serve the profits of the ruling classes, where people's basic freedom to choose who they love and how they want to live is dictated by the law and enforced, in some cases, lethally. In short, it's a literal hellscape. These absolute nutjobs are trying to turn the world into a kind of dystopian nightmare, and quite frankly, that means it's our duty as compassionate human beings to stop them in any way we possibly can.